Chapter 21, Unexpected Changes. The goddess *. The audience chamber was vast, fading into the distance with no walls in sight. Crystalline columns, carved with arcane runes, pulsed with a dim blue-white light as they stretched upwards before vanishing into pitch-black darkness. The floor of the chamber was a smooth red stone, speckled with black. In the center of the chamber, on a dais of silver and gold, the goddess reclined upon an obsidian throne so dark that it seemed to absorb the light. The throne wasn't real in the physical sense, any more than the impossible audience chamber itself could have been. The goddess had created it in the realm of dreams, forging the chamber and its accoutrements through sheer force of will. She had created the chamber in response to a brief synchronization between the veil of her world and Equus, the world of the ponies. The smallest of portals was all that was needed to allow the infiltrator to appear and offer its report, and the goddess found it pleasant to receive the report in a suitable environment. The form the infiltrator took superficially resembled the changeling that hosted its mind, though with green scales in place of chitin and a stripe of blue scales that ran down its back from muzzle tip to dock. The goddess pursed her lips at the sight of it. Apparently, some remembrance of its previous form had managed to survive after all this time. "Speak, infiltrator," the goddess intoned. "The child of chaos is no longer in the garden." Veins of sullen red shot through the goddess throne, pulsing with a magma-like glow, a reflection of the goddess' reaction at the news. Anger, and the frustration of hopes once again dashed. "Thus, I am once again reminded of the futility of planning," the goddess thought as she struggled to keep her temper in check. At the beginning of her incarceration, the goddess had formed many plans. The barrier that imprisoned her had been formed in a rush, amidst the chaos of war. And so, she had reasoned at the time, it must have a weakness that could be exploited. The most obvious vector of attack had been her control over her world's veil. But, no matter how she tried, she still couldn't extend her magic through a portal she herself had created. Not to mention that each time she tried had caused the caretaker to wake from his magically induced suspension. It was the barrier's sheer simplicity that had defeated her in the end. Her power was absorbed by the smaller twin moons that circled her world and used to create the very barrier that prevented her influence from reaching the world below, the planet named Paradise by its former inhabitants. The barrier radiated some of that magic down over the world, but it was magic thoroughly stripped of her influence. And, so, the goddess had abandoned planning, opting instead to arrange matters as advantageously as she could. Her power over Paradise's veil allowed her minuscule influence over other worlds, nudging certain worlds closer to her own if she thought they could be of use to her. When the humans of Earth had first created an artificial portal, that had been the first rekindling of hope in the goddess' heart in many thousands of years. When the humans had first reached Equus, with its diverse and powerful magics, the goddess had once again begun to make plans. And now the child of chaos had gone missing. As the goddess regained her composure, she noted that the infiltrator was waiting patiently. She lifted one thin-fingered hand and gestured towards it. "Explain," she said. The one called Discord was freed from stone. Apparently, one of the equestrian princesses had a vision. A vision. Interesting. Future sight had been very nearly non-existent amongst her people. Only the goddess and a small number of the priesthood were capable of such a feat, at least on her own world. "A vision of what sort?" she asked. "I was unable to ascertain that," the infiltrator replied. "The palace staff has only baseless speculation. However, I do know where Discord is. He is constrained to a small town called Ponyville." "Constrained? How so?" "Powerful wards of order magic keep him trapped there." "Can you break these wards?" the goddess asked. "Can you free Discord?" The infiltrator hesitated before replying. "Possibly," it said eventually. "It would take a considerable amount of time. The wards are very strong, and very complex." "Show me." Memory flooded from the infiltrator, springing fully formed into the goddess consciousness. She examined the wards in minute detail, impressed at both their complexity and their self-reinforcing nature. They were obviously the work of at least one very skilled and powerful spellcrafter. Which made the single large, obvious flaw in the ward so puzzling at first. It had to be deliberate, especially when considering the reinforcements around the floor itself. As she studied the floor, it became clear that the purpose was to allow Discord to escape confinement, but only upon the completion of a very specific ritual. The ritual would work like a key in a lock, immediately summoning the child of chaos to the very spot where the ritual was cast. "Clever," the goddess murmured. "Very clever." She looked down upon the patiently waiting infiltrator. "There is an intentional flaw in the wards, used as a means of summoning Discord. We can use that ritual to bring him where we need him when the time comes." "I am not familiar with the ritual," the infiltrator replied. "Should I attempt to learn it?" "No. Any attempt to do so may compromise your cover. You must remain disguised and in the palace whenever you are not aiding the changeling queen. I can work out the general shape of the ritual by examining the floor itself. There are only so many ways to shape the magic that will unlock this ward." "Very well. Shall I wait here until the spell is completed?" "No. The gateway will be closing soon. I shall contact you again once I have the summoning spell ready. In the meanwhile, this place where Discord is trapped, Ponyville. I seem to recall that this location had some importance." The infiltrator nodded. "Those bearing the artifacts called the elements of harmony reside there." "Harmony? Yes, I do recall them." The goddess considered her options carefully while the infiltrator waited silently at the foot of the throne. It could be that these elements may make for a good fallback plan, should both Discord and Chrysalis fail. She frowned. "Then, how is the so-called queen progressing in her plans?" "She is on pace," the infiltrator replied. "Nearly all of the arcanum has been compromised by this point, and her changeling army is moving into key positions. So far, the ponies are none the wiser." "Very good." Plans within plans within plans, though the necessity of this particular one was something that she found herself regretting. The ponies had no business being caught up in her war, but worse was still to come. Let her know that, the caretaker, wishes for her to keep those 6 alive and unharmed. Tell her that he has a use for them, and will be able to transfer their powers to her. She may separate the bearers from their elements if she considers them dangerous, but she is to keep both the ponies and their elements safe and unharmed. "Yes, my goddess," the infiltrator replied with a bow. The report continued on for a short while, and the goddess issued a few more instructions. After a while, the infiltrator departed to carry out the next leg of its mission. Once again alone in the space she had created, the goddess allowed herself time to revel in the freedom that she could only find in dreams. She stood from her throne, stretching her 4 thin arms towards the boundless sky, enjoying the nearly forgotten feeling of stretching muscles and shifting scale. She called up a breeze and felt the air moving through the crest of feathery scales that ran from the crown of her head to the tip of her tufted tail. Even in dreams, however, time still passed. She had plans to oversee and preparations to make. With a regretful sigh, the goddess allowed the dream to fade back into the ether, returning once again to her captivity. Aaron***. There was a tense moment of anticipation in the darkened theater, a tension which Aaron shared, albeit for a different reason than the rest of the audience. She had her hands up over her eyes, having no desire to see what she knew was going to happen next. There was a crashing sound as the pony on the screen let out a distressed cry, followed shortly after by the glug, glug, glug sound of paint pouring out of an upturned can. The audience started laughing uproariously, of course. I say, the picture quality is quite impressive, darling, Rarity said from the seat next to her. Yeah, Erin replied sourly. She glared up at the screen and the image of her first pony form, which was hunched up on the ground while paint dripped down across her coat. I expect this movie equipment must have set you back a fair amount of money, Rarity continued. She held out a paper bag in her glowing blue aura. Popcorn. No thanks, Erin muttered. Still, all of this is a very generous gift, and believe me, I know something about generosity. Rarity took a dainty sip of her small diet soda. One wonders what you were expecting in return. Erin frowned and glanced at her out of the corner of her eye. Nothing, it was a gift. Rarity arched an eyebrow back at her. You truly want nothing in exchange? No, of course not, Erin began, then broke off with a groan as she saw what the screen was showing now. Oh, not the jump. Really? The image on the screen had shifted, this time showing a 13-year-old version of herself on her black and yellow BMX bike. Little Erin was wearing cargo shorts and a Minnesota Vikings jersey as she braced herself on the top of a hill, looking down the slope towards a dirt ramp. I can't believe I was dumb enough to not wear a helmet. Erin frowned. You know, I could have sworn that ramp was a lot higher. Well, memory can often exaggerate, dear, Rarity replied. She straightened in her seat. Oh, there you go. Just as Erin remembered, her younger self put on a lot of speed. And, also as Erin remembered, her takeoff was a grand thing, launching her teenage self high up into the air. The landing, however, oof. Oosh. The screen version of Erin groaned. The theater audience groaned in sympathy. Oh, my. That looked painful. It's not my fault. Nobody told me I was supposed to be standing when I landed. Erin scowled over her shoulder as the audience behind her began chuckling. I was walking funny for days. You'd think they'd be a little more sympathetic. Comedy equals tragedy plus time, and this was quite a while ago, yes. I suppose. There was a moment of silence between the two of them as the little Erin on the movie screen gingerly got off of her bike and began limping her way home. Have I ever mentioned the importance of trust? Erin gave Rarity a confused look. No, I don't think so. Well, it's very important. Don't you agree? Yeah, I guess. Erin frowned at the unicorn, who was too busy eating popcorn while staring at the screen to notice. What's this about? Oh, nothing much, Rarity replied casually, smiling over at her. Only the fact that you don't trust us very much. Erin's mind went momentarily blank, uncertain of what she'd heard. When it finally registered, she blurted out, I trust you guys. Rarity glanced over at her, arching that eyebrow at her again. Do you? Well, yeah. Why wouldn't I? No idea. The unicorn sighed and placed the popcorn into the empty seat next to her. Well, I'm afraid we're out of time for now. It's time for you to be waking up. What? Waking up. We'll talk again soon, darling, Rarity promised as the dream fragmented around them. The audience was already gone, and the screen was blank as the theater itself faded into darkness. Rarity, wait. Erin woke up with a pained groan, blinking her sandy eyes as she looked around, momentarily wondering why she'd fallen asleep in front of her computer monitor. An orchestra of aches and pains began to hit her, playing an ode to the many various reasons why it's a bad idea to fall asleep while sitting up at your desk. Memory from the previous day hit her like a freight train, and her discomfort was forgotten as her head whipped around to her screen. The probe's data feed was black, which caused a moment of panic until Erin noticed the angry red, 0% for the probe's power display. I guess running it all night with the night vision on isn't the best idea, she mused. Still, that didn't answer her worries about how Fluttershy was doing. Erin grabbed her saddlebags, still packed from the night before, and slung them over her back. She was out the door a minute later, galloping down the road in the early morning sunlight. Tilde. By the time Erin neared Fluttershy's cottage, most of the kinks had worked themselves out of her muscles and joints. She shot a grin at a nearby cloud standing oddly alone in the sky. It was unremarkable except for the wisp of prismatic tail hanging over the edge. It looked like Rainbow Dash had kept up with her own vigil, though judging by the loud snores ripping across the countryside, she hadn't been able to stay awake all night either. Then she saw the cottage, much sooner than she should have, and galloped the rest of the way, stopping by where the cottage's front door should have been. Instead, the cottage was suspended in midair while rotating lazily, the roof now pointed towards the ground. Fluttershy. She yelled. Oh, good morning, Erin, Fluttershy's tired voice said from behind her. Erin turned to see her friend lying on the ground next to a bush. Pinkie Pie was lying next to her, and between them was an open box half full of muffins. Hiya, Sunflower. Pinkie picked up the box and twirled it on one hoof in a display of dexterity that made Erin a little bit jealous. Muffin. Erin was about to turn her down when her stomach rumbled and restored her to sanity. Sure, thanks, she said as she took one. Fluttershy, are you okay? You look kinda ragged. The Pegasus, ordinarily well-groomed, was sagging everywhere. Her coat was matted and dull, her eyes puffy and bloodshot, and her mane was a mess of tangles. I didn't get much sleep last night, Fluttershy confessed. Mostly, we sat up and talked all night. He's really a very interesting person. She frowned, adding, though, I think some of the stories he told me weren't completely true. I'm pretty sure jellyfish don't grow that large. Crisis momentarily over but with hunger still unabated, Erin took a bite of her muffin. It turned out to be blueberry, and still slightly warm from the oven. There was a moment of shocking early morning violence as she devoured the whole thing, only narrowly avoiding eating the paper wrapper along with it. Well, you look exhausted, Erin said once she was done chewing. Can you get him to put your house back so you can get some sleep? Fluttershy sighed. I would, but he vanished about an hour ago. I have no idea where he is. Well, that isn't at all worrying, Erin replied with a shudder. He hasn't gone far, Pinky said confidently. Twilight said we'd know if he tried to leave town. She hummed and tapped her chin. Something about the ward setting off alarms, or something. That wasn't much comfort, as far as Erin was concerned. Still, nothing in town was on fire as far as she could tell, so maybe the spirit of chaos was behaving himself. And maybe the equestrian moon was actually made of cheese. Erin decided to ask Luna the next time she saw her. There wasn't much she could do about Discord and whatever shenanigans he was up to, Erin decided. But Fluttershy was a different matter. Well, you can always sleep in my house. Oh, but I don't want to be a bother. You're not going to be a bother, Fluttershy. I'll be at Applejack's this morning, and I've got my wing therapy this afternoon, so the place will be empty for a while. Granted, she'd want to take a shower before she went to the hospital, but she was pretty sure Applejack wouldn't mind letting her use the one at the farm. Oh, thank you, but I can't leave Angel Bunny behind. Fluttershy gestured at the bush next to her. Erin spotted the rabbit hunched amidst the branches and glaring out at the world with such an intensity that Erin was mildly surprised that the leaves hadn't caught on fire. The little white rabbit turned his glare her way. Good morning, Angel Ra, Erin said solemnly, following it up with a salute. You're welcome to stay in my house as well. If she hadn't known better, she'd have sworn that the rabbit had given her a suspicious look before finally relaxing a little and nodding. Oh, well. If you're sure, I don't want to be any trouble. Erin shook her head. It's no trouble at all, Fluttershy. You can even use my shower. I won't mind, and you'll feel a lot better. Oh okay, well. Thank you. Fluttershy started getting to her hooves, with Pinky helping her up. I'll head over now, if that's okay. Another yawn put the conversation on pause for a moment. I really am quite tired. I'll walk with you, Pinky offered, putting her shoulder against the gently swaying Fluttershy. Erin noticed for the first time that Pinky's stuffed rabbit, Mr. Hugglebunny, was perched on her back, held in place by a small saddle-like device. I'll come back after the morning rush to check on your house. Oh, you don't have to do that, came the inevitable protest. It's okay, I want to, Pinky said. Come on, now, let's get you over to Sunflower's place, and Auntie Pinky will tuck you into bed all nice and snuggly-wuggly. Pinky didn't notice the exasperated frown Fluttershy shot her way. You know I'm a year older than you, right? Pinky giggled. A moment later, Angel Bunny stepped out of the bush he'd been hiding in, gave Erin a courteous nod, and hopped after the pair. Strange rabbit, she muttered before shaking herself. She stepped off the path, opting to take a direct line through the fields towards Sweet Apple Acres instead of taking the road. Rainbow ***. The sun shouldered its way steadily upward into the early morning sky, not always a sure thing in Equestria, and released a beam of glowing golden light. This light sped past lakes and valleys, through forests and towns, avoiding many obstacles only to strike Rainbow directly in the face. The Pegasus let out an annoyed grunt and rolled over, instinctively reshaping the cloud behind her in order to block out the offending light. She was just on the verge of falling back asleep when a stray thought started poking around in her still drowsy brain. She was apparently sleeping on a cloud which, in itself, wasn't all that weird. What was weird was that she could hear the birds singing and smell the dew on the grass, which meant that it was early in the morning. It also meant that she was outside. Her fuzzy brain examined these two facts independently, scrutinizing them and moving them around like jigsaw puzzle pieces for a minute or so before it clicked. For some reason, she'd spent the night sleeping outside on a cloud, rather than in her bed at home. That realization also sparked a few other thoughts, which rushed at her with all the grace and subtlety of an avalanche. Rainbow's eyelids snapped open just in time to catch another of the sun's golden rays square in the eyes. She flinched back with a pained hiss even as a hind hoof flashed out, dispelling the cloud and dropping her earthward. Well-muscled wings snapped open, catching the air enough to turn her fall into a directed dive, meaning that Rainbow made the short flight to Fluttershy's house in the blink of an eye. Or, rather, where Fluttershy's house should have been. Now the whole cottage was hanging sideways in the air, with the whole thing revolving slowly in a clockwise direction. Fluttershy! Rainbow yelled, rushing up to the currently horizontal door of the cottage and pounding it with a hoof. There was no answer, so Dash sipped inside an open window. Fluttershy, she called again. There was no sign of her friend. All of her furniture had tumbled to the lowest point of the house, skittering and rolling along the wall to the floor as the cottage slowly revolved upright again. That jerk, Rainbow snarled. There was a certain draconiquess that Dash was going to give a piece of her mind to. But first, there was something a lot more important to take care of. Fluttershy. It was easy enough for Dash to avoid the falling furniture and personal effects, though the constantly changing orientation of the cottage made it a little hard to keep her perspective. She flitted her way to Fluttershy's bedroom, hoping to find some sign of her friend. The sound of running water brought her up short, coming from the home's small bathroom. Is she taking a shower? Dash muttered, incredulous. Wait, how is the plumbing working? There was no answer when Rainbow knocked on the bathroom door, so she let herself in. Typically, it was considered rude to barge in on another pony in the shower, but these weren't typical times. There was definitely a shadowy shape behind the shower curtain. A high-pitched voice was humming away, some directionless little tune echoing off the walls. Hey, Fluttershy. You okay? Dash asked. When the figure behind the curtain didn't reply, she got closer. Fluttershy. Still no response. Her heart began pounding in her chest like she'd just flown a race against the Wonderbolts, adding to the fear she'd felt since she'd first seen Fluttershy's cottage rotating in midair, and she knew it wouldn't settle down until she saw that her friend was okay. Muttering a quiet apology under her breath, Dash reached out and yanked the curtain back with a forehoof. Eek. Discord shrieked, cringing up against the wall and holding a scrub brush defensively across his chest. Gar. Dash shouted in reply, startled half out of her skin by the sight of the sudsed-up spirit of chaos. The two of them stared at each other for a moment, Discord with the scrub brush in one hand and a yellow rubber ducky in the other, and Dash feeling like her heart was trying to break out of her chest. Discord glowered at her from underneath the ridiculous flower-printed shower cap. I swear, can't even take a shower in peace, he complained. Dash gaped at him. Her eyes flicked up to the shower cap, and for a brief moment she wondered where he was keeping his horns. Where's Fluttershy? She shouted, flitting up until their muzzles were almost touching. You ever hear of personal space, Dashy Poo? I'll knock you into space if you don't tell me where she is. Discord groaned. I expect better comebacks from you, Rainbow Dash. It had been kind of lame. Not like Dash would ever admit that. I don't care. Where is she? If you've hurt her, I swear. Discord's eyes took on an unfocused look for a moment. It seems she's catching some Zeds over at your mutual friend's house. You know, the shape-shifting pony-like thing. Dash blinked. Erin, she guessed. Oh, was that her name? Discord started scrubbing his back with the rubber duck. He squeezed the scrub brush, which let out a mournful squeak. I wasn't paying attention. Gee, I wonder why she had to go sleep over there. Dash scowled at him when he opened his mouth. Don't answer that, it was a rhetorical question. You know a word with 4 syllables. Discord grinned while scrubbing between the toes of his dragon leg. I'm impressed, I didn't think you had it in you. Shut up, Rainbow replied. I'm going to go check on her, and if she's not there, I'm coming back for you. A dire threat, indeed, Discord sneered in reply. He'd shut the shower off and was now drying himself with a large, fluffy pink towel that he'd produced from somewhere. While I'm doing that, you can put her house back down where it belongs. Discord grinned and flung the towel away. Oh, I would, but I'm afraid I was just about to go out. He snapped his talons, and light flared. When it cleared, the Draconicus was gone. Rainbow Dash snarled out a curse and flung herself out the nearest window. Ordinarily, she would try to keep her speed down while in town. The last time she'd really cut loose, the mayor had some choice words for her. Words which included things like irresponsible and dangerous and, most worryingly, punitive fines and flight restrictions. She couldn't worry about that right now. Her wings blurred as she pushed herself as fast as she could through town, the wash of her passing rattling windows in their frames and knocking loose thatch from nearby roofs. She arrived at Erin's house less than a minute later, flying directly to the upstairs window and peering in. Much to her relief, she immediately spotted the Fluttershy-shaped lump in Erin's bed. The tight band of tension around Rainbow's chest started to loosen as she took in the pink mane and yellow forehooves resting on top of Erin's big, fluffy comforter. Fluttershy had a look of perfect, serene rest on her face as she slept, her ear twitching slightly in whatever dream it was she was having. A small white shape was curled up at the bottom of the bed. Angel Bunny raised his head and glared up at Dash as if daring her to do something as monumentally stupid as waking the sleeping mare up. Rainbow heaved out a sigh of relief. Fluttershy was okay. For the moment, that was the most important thing in the world. She flew up to Erin's roof and, finding a relatively comfy spot amidst the shining blue-black solar tiles, lay down to wait for her friend to wake up. Pinkie Pie *. The morning baking was finished, the breakfast rush was over, and the cleanup was done, which meant that Pinkie Pie now had the rest of the day off from the bakery. Her first stop was to deliver a fresh banana cream pie to Mrs. Lavender's rooftop, like she did every morning. After that, Pinkie had spent an hour or so with the old widow herself, listening to her talk of the old days, all while surreptitiously tidying up her small house whenever the elderly mayor wasn't looking. Mrs. Lavender tended to speak in a steady stream of disjointed stories, tales of ponies long since passed on or moved away, most of whom Pinkie had never met. It was a sad thing, in a way, but in a different way, it filled Pinkie's heart with an oddly melancholy sort of joy. The ponies themselves might have been gone, some of them for longer than Pinkie had been alive, but they had left their stories behind in Mrs. Lavender's failing memory. And now they lived on in Pinkie Pie's memory, too, which meant that they had a strange sort of immortality. It wasn't perfect, but it was good enough for Pinkie Pie. And Mrs. Lavender really seemed to like these little visits. After leaving the old mayor's house, her second stop of the morning was prompted partially out of an earlier promise, but mostly out of curiosity. Mainly, she wanted to see if Fluttershy's house was still revolving. So, off and away she bounced, out into the streets of Ponyville. Her happy pronk slowed and eventually stopped, with Pinkie looking around as the mood of the town settled over her like a heavy, damp blanket. The atmosphere around town was nervous and subdued compared to the usual mid-morning activity she was used to. That was probably because of their newest neighbor being the self-titled Spirit of Chaos, she decided. It was something that was bound to put even the most level-headed ponies on edge. The townsponies were looking over their shoulders and flinching at every noise, scuttling around the market without the normal chit-chat that made life in Ponyville so much fun. The mood felt like a thunderstorm waiting to happen, hiding just out of sight behind some hills, and it made Pinkie's coat twitch and itch like crazy. Pinkie frowned at the sight of it. It seemed like she had some work to do. At least the movie theater was doing good business, she noticed as she walked past it. Maybe it was because it offered an escape from worry, or maybe because human movies were so very different from pony films. The marquee currently displayed 2 lines, The Best of Buster Keaton for the matinee shows and The Wizard of Oz for the evening show. She hadn't seen that many ponies lined up outside the movie theater since. Well, since ever, now that she thought about it. You'll like Buster Keaton, she called out to the ponies waiting in line, causing more than a few to jump and turn around to look at her. Especially the one about the house. It's a real hoot. She grinned and waved, receiving a few smiles and waves in return, and continued on her way. That amount of cheering up wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Soon enough, Fluttershy's house came into view. Actually, it was sooner than normal, on account of it being way up in the air like that. On the ground, near where the front door should have been, was a pair of perfectly perplexed ponies. Pinkie Pie perked her ears forward and increased her trotting speed, careful not to upset Mr. Hugglebunny, who was situated in his now usual spot on her back. Fluttershy. Fluttershy, where are you? Rarity was calling out, staring helplessly at the rotating house above her. Oh, this is bad, Twilight fretted, dancing in place. What are we going to do? I don't know. Rarity cried out in response. I'm not sure I can teleport up there with it moving like that. But what if poor Fluttershy is in danger? Rarity replied, looking a little wild-eyed. We have to get up there. We need dash. Twilight was scanning the sky with quick flicks of her head. Or, any Pegasus, really. Oh, poor Fluttershy, Rarity whimpered. What if Discord did something to her? We never should have left her alone. Twilight moaned. This is all our fault. Rarity cried. Everything is bad and wrong and terrible forever. Pinkie Pie wailed, causing the other two ponies to squeal and jump for some reason. Oh, except Fluttershy. She's fine, she's just getting some sleep over at Sunflower's house. Rarity and Twilight blinked, taking a moment to process that. Really? Twilight asked eventually. Yuha, Pinkie replied, nodding like her head was on a spring. We both stopped out earlier today to see her, and she was really worn out. I guess, Shy was up most of the night talking to him. There was no need to say who, him, was. Oh, the poor dear, Rarity said, while Twilight shuddered. She can manage, Pinkie replied, waving a hoof. Give her a week, maybe two, and she'll have mean old Discord wrapped around her hoof. Twilight chuckled at that. I'd like to think so, Pinkie. Pinkie grinned, taking her own worry and doubt and shoving it deep, deep down inside, where nobody else could even get a peek at it. Don't worry so much, it's all going to end in friendship and rainbows, you'll see. *****. Pinkie Pie had some very important work to do. So did the others, actually, though of course it wasn't nearly as important as what Pinkie was up to. Rarity, it turned out, desperately needed to work on some dress orders that she had been putting off. Twilight needed to check the anti-Discord wards around town, so the three friends went their separate ways after agreeing to meet up for dinner that night, to talk about how things were going with Discord in town. Pinkie had her own mission, one that was of the utmost of importance to her as Ponyville's official unofficial cheer-upper and premier party pony. She had to cheer up the ponies in town. And that meant that she had to pull out all the stops and assemble a party to end all parties, the biggest and bestest party she'd ever pulled off. It was a high bar to reach, but Pinkie was already planning a way. A list was forming in her head, well, 3 lists, to be technically accurate. The first list contained an inventory of all the party supplies she already had on hoof, carefully stowed away in the basement under Sugarcube Corner. The second list was all of the supplies she'd need to buy, in order to make this the biggest blowout that Ponyville had ever seen. The third list was a list of invitees. It was the easiest list, having only one entry, and that entry was every pony. Pinkie considered that for a moment before mentally adding, except for Discord, at the end. She felt a momentary pang of guilt at that before shrugging it off. Discord being at the name of party still pending, party would make every pony nervous and scared, which would kinda be the opposite of what she was going for. Besides, Discord wasn't a pony, so did every pony even apply to him. It was definitely food for thought, unlike cupcakes, which was food for parties. And occasionally breakfast. Plus, Secra wasn't a pony, and neither were Cranky and Matilda, but Pinkie definitely wanted them to come. So, now mental list number 3 had every pony except Discord, crossed out and replaced with everyone in or around Ponyville who wants to attend, except for Discord, but with the except for Discord part underlined 3 times in red ink. The party was already assembling itself in her imagination, and it was a glorious thing. There was going to be music, and food, and games, and prizes, and dancing, and there was no way she could pull this off by herself, Pinkie realized with a deflating sigh. Not if she wanted everything done before the end of the week. She'd need help. Mr. Hugglebunny, Pinkie asked. There was a chime sound from the plush rabbit astride her back before Mr. Hugglebunny's mournful voice spoke out. What is it, Pinkie Pie? Please set a reminder, ask the girls for help regarding Super Party, 1 hour from now. There was a momentary pause before Mr. Hugglebunny spoke again. Okay, reminder set, ask the girls for help regarding Super Party, set for 12:17 p.m. Would you like the reminder to repeat until completed? Ooh, that was a good idea. Pinkie nodded, then remembered that Mr. Hugglebunny didn't really get gestures like that. Yes, please, every hour until I ask you to stop. There was another chime sound. Reminder set, Pinkie Pie. Pinkie was just about to thank him when a familiar and, as Rarity would say, most unwelcome voice spoke from above her. Oh, my. A party. Discord came down from the sky as if he was swimming through the air, a pair of water wings on his arms and a swimming cap on his head. Where are his horns? Pinkie wondered briefly before taking that thought and shoving it into an imaginary box labeled, stuff that doesn't matter right now. Oh, my goodness, could this be it? Discord asked as he touched down on the dirt road in front of her. He placed his paw and talon on either side of his face, his eyes literally sparkling. Is this my long-delayed, welcome to Ponyville, party? He frowned, then, ears drooping and his bottom lip wobbling. You throw one for everyone else who shows up in town, but you never did for me. Guilt that Pinkie knew she shouldn't be feeling welled up. She balled it up and shoved it into the same imaginary box, where it could keep company with the speculation about his currently missing horns. Well, I figured you threw yourself your own party, Pinkie quipped, slipping on a number 64 smile, blatantly fake and not caring if he noticed. You know, the whole turning Ponyville into the chaos capital of Equestria thing you did. True, Discord replied as he stroked his goatee. Still, it's not the same as being welcomed, is it? Pinkie let the fake smile fall away from her muzzle. I throw a welcome party for new friends, Discord. An arrow sped out of nowhere, thudding into Discord's chest with a shocking suddenness that made Pinkie jump and yelp. Oh, you wound me, Pinkie Pie, Discord moaned, clutching at the arrow. Right to the heart, you know that. He pulled the arrow out, only now the end was a big, colorful, spiral lollipop. We could be friends, don't you think? He offered the lollipop to Pinkie, who wrinkled her muzzle in disgust and pushed it away. After all, Discord continued, out of all your friends, you and I are the most alike. He took a bite out of the lollipop while Pinkie scowled up at him. No, we're not, she stated simply. Discord's eyes twinkled. We're not, he asked with a voice full of humor. We're both seen as weird and strange by every pony around us, aren't we? Oh, the shenanigans we could get up to. We could have so much fun. Unlike me and Flutterbutter. He held out the lollipop again, which was now shaped like a crescent moon due to the huge bite he'd taken out of it. Sure you don't want a bite? Pinky ignored the lollipop, instead opting to narrow her eyes up at the spirit of chaos. You really don't get me at all, do you? Oh, what's not to get? Discord rolled his eyes and pitched the lollipop backwards over his shoulder. The stick caught fire and it launched itself up into the air with a shriek before exploding like a firework. The last few ponies who hadn't fled the market at Discord's first appearance all flinched and beat a hasty retreat. You're a pony like all the other goody-goody, predictable ponies of the world. It honestly makes me gag. You're the only one I've met who is even slightly interesting. The market square was deserted, now, which suited Pinky just fine. An idea had popped into her head, a wonderful, terrible, awful and incredible idea, and she was in just the right place to do it. She ambled her way to a nearby tree, as if trying to get away from Discord, who tagged along behind her while still droning on. Why, in all the centuries I've been around, no pony has ever managed to truly surprise me, he was saying. You seemed awfully surprised by the friendship rainbow to the face, Pinky pointed out. If you want to think so, Discord replied. That doesn't change the fact that you're all so boring it makes me want to cry. And cry he did, big, blubbery fake tears, and Pinky decided that crocodile tears are a lot less creepy when they're not actual crocodiles. Though, the crocs themselves were kinda cute as they scampered away through the grass. Just stop, Pinky said, bucking the tree in what she hoped would just look like an expression of frustration. If we're so boring, why not just leave us alone? Up in the branches of the tree, she heard a quiet rattle, followed by an oh-so-faint sighing sound. The ball is knocked loose, and it's rolling down the tree branch. She thought. You need to understand the true meaning of chaos, Discord intoned, drawing himself up pompously. There's a reason why I blah blah blah. Aha, Pinky replied, tuning out Discord's self-important speech. Ball hits the counterweight, which kicks off the spring. Blah blah, blah blah blah, Discord continued proclaiming. Blah, blah, blah 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 blah, quote. Whirligig releases, the tension in the wire goes slack, causing the base to rotate. Aha, blah, blah blah, quote. Aha, she said, then became aware of the fact that he'd stopped talking. What? I asked if you're even listening to me. He glowered down at her, arms folded across his chest. It seems clear that you're not. Sorry, I was distracted for a few seconds, there. There was a faint twang sound in the distance, from way over by Mrs. Lavender's house. Or, more precisely, from Mrs. Lavender's rooftop. Pinky frowned, realizing that an adjustment would need to be made for Discord's taller than a pony stature. Could you move your head down just a skosh? Discord frowned, lowering his head down until he was almost eye level with Pinky. What's a sko? A ballistic banana cream pie smacked him full in the face with a thick and oh so satisfying thwack. Noise. That's for what you did to Sunflower, Pinky yelled. And then she turned on a hoof and ran as fast as her little pink hoofsies could take her, because that's what sensible mares did when they pie the avatar of chaos in the face, and Pinkie Pie was nothing if not sensible. She took the first turn she could, then another, turning down streets at random and racing until her legs burned and her chest heaved. She came to a stop in a narrow alleyway, panting and leaning against the wall in the back of Mr. Davenport's shop. I take it back, Discord said from above her. He still had pie in his bushy eyebrows and chunks of banana in his beard. In all my many centuries of life, one pony has managed to truly surprise me. Pinkie stomped a hoof. Ooh, I knew I shouldn't have taken the streets at random. Chaos, right, that's how you found me, isn't it? Not quite, Discord scooped a glob of pie filling off of his eyebrow with a talon and popped it into his mouth. Banana cream, nice choice, and fresh, too, well, duh. I wouldn't hit some pony in the face with an old pie. Pinkie rolled her eyes. That's just plain rude. I appreciate it, Discord said. He took off his bathing cap, which Pinkie had totally forgotten he was still wearing. His mismatched horns popped up with a rubbery, boing, noise. Good thing I still had this on, or my mane would be a mess. So, how did you find me? Pinkie asked. Oh, that's simple, he replied. I can see through time itself. He waved his arms through the air and made a spooky sounding, ooh, noise. Pinkie considered that rationally and logically for a few seconds before calmly giving her rebuttal. No you can't, Discord blinked. I assure you, I can. Nope. She shook her head, resolute. If you can see the future, I never could have pied you, and we never would have been able to rainbow you back into a statue. An overstuffed armchair popped into existence. Discord, now wearing a tweed jacket and black-rimmed glasses, sat down in it. Very astute, but just because I can see through time doesn't mean that I do it all the time. He pulled a pipe out of the jacket and gave it a puff, causing rainbow-colored bubbles to float out of it. The past and present are easy, since there's only one of each. Something in Pinkie's head went click. That's what you meant about hearing everything Celestia said. You looked into the past to hear it. Very good, I'm impressed, Discord replied, grinning smugly down at her. What, did you think I was aware of my surroundings while I was petrified for centuries? I'd go insane. Insaner. Which would explain a lot, really. Discord waggled his eyebrows at her. Good point, he said. But the future. Ah, the future. He waved his pipe through the air. So many possibilities. So much potential. So much lovely chaos. He grinned down at her, and she shivered just a little. But when I said I look into the future, I meant all of it, all at once. Every possible outcome of every decision and action that I, you, or any creature takes, even the actions I take in response to the things I see in the future, which makes it even more delightfully chaotic. All of that spinning down into a single thread, newly impossible futures being discarded one by one until the only thing left is the ever-changing now. He shrugged. It's oodles of fun, but it gives me a doozy of a headache. Pinkie hated to admit it, but she was impressed. Wow. When I broke free last time, I made the best decisions that I could to end up in the best possible future for me. He grinned. Things don't always turn out like I plan, though. Becoming a lawn ornament, you mean? Indeed. Discord clapped, and his chair and outfit disappeared with a flash and bang. See, I told you that you and I are alike. Not many ponies would get that as easily as you did. Pinkie didn't smile. She knew when she was being butted up. I told you already, we're nothing alike. Oh, come on, Pinks. You hit me in the face with a pie. Me. Name one other pony that could have pulled that off. He frowned down at her. What's up with that, by the way? I have distractions set up all around town, in case of a boring conversation emergency. See? Discord gestured at her with both hands. That's what I mean. We both love being weird and random. That's true, Pinky replied, frowning. But I like to do weird, random things around other ponies to make them laugh. You like to do weird, random things to other ponies, to make yourself laugh. It's not the same, not at all. Discord waved dismissively with his eagle's claw. Ah, who cares? So I introduced some chaos to brighten up some ponies' already miserable life. At least I get a laugh out of it. Pinky took a deep breath to calm herself. Some instinct was telling her that this was important, the most important lesson that she, herself, could teach Discord. She had to get the words right. You think you're having fun, she said slowly. And, maybe you are. You sure seem like you are, most of the time. When you're not being all angry and impatient, at least. But a laugh is always better when it's shared with friends. Discord snorted, folding his arms across his chest again. Oh, come on, now. Really? Pinky grinned. Yup, I've never laughed harder or longer than I have with my friends. That's the best laughter there is. But you don't want to be my friend, Discord replied, pouting. I'm willing to try, Pinky replied, surprising herself. But there's something you need to do, first. What's that? You want a bribe, it's concert tickets, a return of the chocolate raining cotton candy clouds. Ooh, Pinky blinked, then shook her head. No, I mean, yes, but that's not what I meant. You have to apologize for what you did to me and my friends. Oh, that's all. Discord straightened himself up, holding out a bouquet of fake flowers while he cleared his throat. Pinky, no. Pinky stomped a hoof. You can't just say the words, you have to mean them. And you have to know what you're apologizing for. He hesitated for a moment, frowning down at her. I'm assuming that it's for what I did to you and your friends when I last broke free, yes. That's part of it, but it's not all of it. Discord scowled like a thunderhead, tossing the flowers away. You're not making this easy. If you were a better person, it would be easy, Pinky thought. She congratulated herself on being wise enough not to actually come out and say it, though. Instead, she said, it's not always easy making friends. Quite the contrary. Making friends has always come quite easily to me. Light flashed as he snapped his talons. See. Pinky was about to ask him what he meant, but a stirring on her back made her words choke in her throat. Slowly, she turned her head to look at her all but forgotten passenger. Mr. Hugglebunny straightened up from his perpetual slouch, blinking his black button eyes at her. Pinkie Pie. The animated plush animal said in his familiar mournful voice. Mr. Hugglebunny. The plush rabbit held up a fuzzy paw in front of his black button eyes. I seem to have acquired new hardware. His mouth, a cute little W, made of stitching, didn't move when he spoke. Instead, the sound just radiated out of the air where his mouth was. I'm not sure that the driver was properly signed. Pinkie's head whipped around, staring wide-eyed at the grinning Draconicus in front of her. What did you do? Made a friend for you. Don't you like it? Discord shrugged. Oh, well, it's not like this enchantment is going to last for long, anyway. A chill crept up Pinkie's spine. What do you mean? Discord put a sharp-looking grin on his muzzle. Unlike boring old pony magic, chaos magic isn't what you'd call stable. The only consistency it has is how wonderfully inconsistent it is. I'd say, all things considered. He eyed the plush rabbit while stroking his scraggly beard. This particular enchantment will last a day. Maybe two. A wave of chill horror swept through Pinkie's entire body. You made him alive, but it's only temporary, she asked, her voice numb and hollow. Discord gave her a puzzled frown. All life is temporary, isn't it? Pinkie stared at Discord, stunned, for what felt like a significant fraction of eternity. Then she turned and ran away, leaving Discord behind. She was mildly surprised that he didn't try to follow her. Ponyville flew by in a pastel-colored blur as she ran like she'd never ran before, her legs flashing as she dodged around obstacles and ponies alike. She heard protests from startled ponies as she ran past them, but paid them no mind. Her only thought was to get to the library as fast as possible. Pinkie Pie was a mare of simple beliefs, and right now those beliefs were telling her that Twilight Sparkle could fix this. She just had to. Twilight Sparkle *. The door to the Golden Oaks Library practically exploded open, startling Twilight so much that she very nearly dropped the book she was in the process of reshelving. She glowered over at the door and the pony in it, ready to unleash a scolding that would be both epic and scalding in nature, when she noted that the pony in question was a wide-eyed and visibly distraught Pinkie Pie. Pinkie? She asked, moving cautiously towards her friend. What's wrong, Twilight? Oh, thank goodness. Pinkie rushing forward. I was walking through town and planning a party, you know, because every pony is all upset and nervous because of Discord, when you know who himself showed up and started pestering me, so I hit him in the face with a pie and ran away, and then he made Mr. Hugglebunny alive. Twilight blinked at the flood of information. What? Pinkie took a deep breath. Twilight. Oh, thank goodness. I was walking through town. No, I mean. Twilight shook her head, trying to refocus. What's this about Discord? He did something to your tablet. Mr. Hugglebunny, yeah. Pinkie sniffled, and Twilight was alarmed to see that there were tears welling up in her friend's eyes. He made him alive, but it's not forever. Still not quite understanding, how could an inanimate object be alive? Pinkie's obvious anxiety left Twilight feeling a little shaken. Come and sit down, Twilight said. Whatever's wrong, I know we can figure it out. Thank you, Pinkie said as she shuffled past her. As she walked past, Twilight turned a critical eye on the large, grey plush rabbit on Pinkie's back. The rabbit's head slowly turned towards her of its own accord, black button eyes blinking slowly at her. Hello, Mr. Hugglebunny said in his doleful voice. Twilight replied, shrinking back. Wait, you were serious? Yeah, Pinkie said as she removed the rabbit from her back and sat down on the couch. Discord did something to him. I don't know what, but I know you can help me. I'll do my best, Twilight said, staring at the plush rabbit out of the corner of her eye. We should really get Erin over here. If I'm the local expert on magic, she's the local expert on human technology. Pinkie nodded. Mr. Hugglebunny, could you send one of those text message things to Sunflower? Mr. Hugglebunny straightened up and let out what sounded like a long-suffering sigh. Of course I can, Pinkie Pie. What would you like it to say? How about, come to the library right away, it's an emergency. Large, floppy rabbit ears twitched on top of Mr. Hugglebunny's head. Message sent, Pinkie. He returned to his regular slouch, his ears drooping over his face. Thanks. Fascinating, Twilight murmured, walking around in order to study the rabbit from multiple angles. Completely fascinating, combining magic and computer technology. I always thought this would have so many potential applications that, she caught Pinkie's look and cleared her throat. That aren't at all important right now. Why don't you tell me what happened? Twilight sat down next to Pinkie on the lone, small sofa in the library's reading area. Once settled, Pinkie began filling her in on what had happened after the three of them had gone their separate ways. At the mention of a party, Twilight gave a thoughtful nod. Trust Pinkie to think of the morale of the town. It was something Twilight hadn't even considered. At one point during the recitation, Twilight held up her hoof. Wait, you were serious about hitting Discord in the face with a pie? Yup. Pinkie grinned. Banana cream. Twilight considered that for a long moment before rendering her verdict. Nice, I know, right. Pinkie grinned for a moment before her expression turned serious again. But then he turned Mr. Hugglebunny alive. Pinkie, Twilight started, trying to make her voice as gentle as she could. I know you've always acted like Mr. Hugglebunny is alive, but Erin explained how computers work. You know he really can't be, don't you? Pinkie shook her head with a sigh. I suppose it's my own fault every pony thinks I don't know what's real and what isn't. Pretending is fun. She looked up at Twilight, her expression earnest. I know he wasn't alive, but now I'm not so sure. She pressed her lips together as tears welled up in her eyes. And Discord said it would only last for a day or two. Twilight put on a reassuring grin and patted her friend on the shoulder. I don't think you have to worry too much about it, she said. If anything, this is probably something like a chaos-based come-to-life spell. It can't make something alive. Pinkie Pie blinked at her. But it's got come to life, right in the name. Well, yes, true, but it doesn't actually make things alive. It just animates them. Like, remember when I told you about how I cast a spell on that plow during winter wrap-up? Yes. Pinkie replied slowly, but that was a wagon. Mr. Hugglebunny is different. Well, you see, when you get right down to it. Twilight. Yes, Pinkie. Could the wagon talk? Twilight blinked a few times. No. Then it's different. Well, I admit that these computers can seem like they're self-aware, but that's not the same as being sapient. But are you sure? Pinkie asked, leaning forward and staring intently into her eyes. If we just let the magic wear out. She shook her head. Can you be absolutely, completely, 150% sure? Well, no, because percentages. Then we have to figure out how to keep him animated. Pinkie hugged the rabbit to her chest again. If we can't know for sure, then we have to take care of him. Arguments started lining up in Twilight's mind, not the least of which was a firm denial of even the possibility of Discord creating sapient life. They all died on her tongue in the face of Pinkie's resolute expression. Well, okay, she said instead. I'll see what I can do. Pinkie's answering grin was electric and joyful. Oh, thank you, Twilight. She set Mr. Hugglebunny down on the couch and gave Twilight a big hug. Mr. Hugglebunny, Twilight's going to help you. Isn't that great? Twilight barely managed to suppress a shiver as the rabbit blinked up at her. Thank you, I guess, Mr. Hugglebunny said. Ah. You're welcome. Slightly creeped out, Twilight managed to pull herself from Pinkie's hug. Why don't you? I'll go get some lemonade. Why don't you get comfortable, and I'll be right back. Okie dokie, Pinkie said as she slumped down onto the couch. Getting drinks and a snack was as good an excuse to compose herself as any. And it just so happened that there was a pitcher of lemonade in the refrigerator, squeezed fresh just that morning. Twilight took it out, along with 2 glasses. After a moment of consideration, she added a 3rd glass, in case Erin showed up, and then took some time to consider potential snacks. Raw vegetables were typically preferred during the midday, at least as far as Twilight was concerned. As much as she liked the pastries she knew that Pinkie would probably prefer, some ponies had to watch what they ate in order to maintain a trim figure. Still, as acceptable as raw veggies could be, Pinkie was obviously distraught. Perhaps something tastier was in order. Twilight finally settled on sliced cheese and savory crackers, arranging them just so on the tray. At the last minute, Twilight added a few carrot and celery sticks, because she didn't have access to a calorie-defying metabolism. By the time she made it back out to the sitting room, Pinkie looked much improved. Mr. Hugglebunny was seated on the couch next to her, still looking around while blinking his little black button eyes. Twilight ignored him and set the tray with the snacks down on the coffee table, pouring both Pinkie and herself a drink just as the library door sprang open once again. I got your text, Erin said as she walked in. She was breathing heavily, obviously having run here. Hiya, Sunflower. Pinkie said, bouncing over to hug the other mare. Hey, Pinkie, Erin said, hugging her back. So what's up? I was just wrapping up my first wing therapy. She trailed off, staring at the large stuffed rabbit on the couch, who raised a paw and offered up a slow wave. Hello, Mr. Hugglebunny said. Erin blinked. She stared open-mouthed at the rabbit, then at Pinkie, then at Twilight, before finally returning her shocked gaze to the rabbit. What the hell? Twilight cleared her throat. Discord did it. The confusion on Erin's face was washed away by a look of comprehension. She said, some sort of illusion, or something. Twilight shook her head. Not exactly. I think it's a variant of a high-order animation spell, commonly referred to as a come-to-life spell. Oh, wow. Erin sat down heavily on the floor. Magic can do that, huh? Oh, easily, Twilight said as Pinkie disengaged from Erin and made her way over to the snacks on the table. It's not always permanent, though. Okay, Erin said, frowning at the plush rabbit. So, how can I help? Twilight didn't get a chance to answer as Pinkie, spraying a mouthful of cracker crumbs, blurted out, you need to prove he's alive so we have a reason to keep the magic going. Erin shot Twilight a doubtful look. Pinkie, I explained about AI when I gave you the tablet, remember? He's different, now, Pinkie said. She sat down on the floor, crossing her forelegs across her chest and giving them both a defiant glare. I know, I can tell, he's different. Erin looked doubtful. Twilight cleared her throat, getting the attention of the other two mares. Isn't there some way you can test? I mean, we each have our tablets, we can check to see if Mr. Hugglebunny acts unusual in any way. I suppose, Erin said, rubbing a hoof on her chin. There's also something called a Turing Test. It was proposed a long time ago as a test to determine if we've got an AI capable of passing as sapient. I don't recall if there were specific questions to ask, but I can ask him something else. Oh, thank you. Pinky cried out. She hugged Erin again, who chuckled weakly and patted her on the back. I knew you could prove he was alive. That's not, Erin started, then cut herself off. I mean, that's no problem, Pinky. She looked over at Mr. Hugglebunny, who was looking at her blankly. So, I guess I can ask Mr. Hugglebunny. Access authority not recognized, Mr. Hugglebunny interrupted. You are not Pinkie Pie. It's all right, Pinky said. Go ahead and answer any questions Sunflower has, okay? Okay, Pinky, Mr. Hugglebunny replied. He looked up at Erin. Ask your questions, Sunflower. Erin's eyes widened and she took a step back. Twilight frowned. Is something wrong? That shouldn't be possible, Erin said, her voice shaky. What? Twilight looked at the plush rabbit and then back to Erin. You mean taking instructions from Pinky? He does that all the time. Twilight frowned, suddenly uncertain. Doesn't he? Not like this, Erin replied, looking worried. His security doesn't work that way, and he shouldn't have been able to just recognize me like that. Why not? Twilight asked. It's not like what she asked him to do is all the complicated. Mr. Hugglebunny is pretty smart, Pinky piped in. It's not a question of smart or not, it's about dealing with real-world context, Erin replied. I mean, the system running on the tablet is actually pretty limited in what it can do in the real world, and facial recognition doesn't work on ponies, yet. Twilight frowned down at the rabbit. Wait, you're not saying he's actually... There was a flash of incandescent light. A bouncing baby bunny bundle of joy. Discord shouted gleefully as he hovered up near the ceiling. Discord. Twilight stomped a hoof. I didn't invite you here. You didn't forbid me from entering, either, Discord pointed out. Besides, it's not every day a Draconicus becomes a father. He snapped his talons, and baby blue t-shirts with white lettering appeared on everyone in the room. Twilight looked down at hers, reading it upside down. Congratulations, it's a bunny. The shirt read. Oh, I couldn't be more proud. Discord crowed while shoving a cigar into her mouth. She spat it out, but he'd already moved on to Erin, who had her foreleg up to block her mouth. He tucked the cigar behind her ear, instead. I'm a daddy. You're not his daddy. Pinky shouted. Discord stopped, looking at her. Well, so much for teaching the little scamp how to play ball, then. His shoulders slumped and he let out an exaggerated sigh. Well, I guess I should be going, then. Though, I suppose. Twilight didn't buy the thoughtful look on Discord's face for 1 second. What? Well, it seems to me like you'll need someone to renew the magic on the little fella whenever it's about to run out, Discord said. He reached out and ruffled Mr. Hugglebunny's ears with his lion's paw. Please stop that, Mr. Hugglebunny said. Discord rolled his eyes and took his paw away. Realization hit Twilight like a runaway cart. That's why you did this, she said, her voice rising along with the anger she felt. I'm not sure what you mean, Twilight, Discord replied, his innocent tone clashing with the smug self-satisfaction oozing through every syllable. After all, I was just trying to do something nice for my new good friend Pinkie Pie. How was I to know she wouldn't like it? He grinned at them, and Twilight felt her heart thud sharply in her chest. Of course, there is the little matter of my probation, he said. I'm in danger of having the elements of harmony unleashed on me at any moment. He reclined in midair, crossing his legs at the knee and folding his arms behind his head. I'm not worried for myself, of course, but I'd be horrified, simply horrified, if I weren't around to renew the enchantment on my dear friend, Little. Whatever his name is. He flipped around, floating in midair on his stomach, grin still in place and his eyes sparkling. Chapter 22, New Friends. Erin**tilde. Pinky was engaged in an energetic conversation with the freshly animated Mr. Hugglebunny near the library's small sofa. Or, to be more accurate, she was speaking energetically while the plush rabbit occasionally responded in a dour monotone. Discord had disappeared in a flash a few minutes earlier after claiming that he had to go to pop some popcorn. Erin stood across the library floor, watching Pinky and her new friend, while chewing worriedly on her bottom lip. Next to her, Twilight was making a show of reshelving books, though she was mostly just staring at the titles with a distant look on her face. So, what do we do about this? Erin asked softly. Twilight glanced over at her, adjusting the element of magic with a hoof as the tiara slipped slightly forward on her head. What can we do? She asked, just as softly. It's a trap, and it's one I never saw coming. I could just dispel the magic, but I think that might break Pinky's heart, and I'm not willing to do that. And, are you sure he's not conscious? Honestly, no. You'd need to ask a computer scientist. Or maybe a philosopher. Erin let out a wry chuckle. I never thought the AI singularity would come in the form of a plush, magical bunny. The what, now? Never mind, Erin said. A joke in poor taste. But I personally don't know of any way to test for actual consciousness. Maybe if we talk to some computer experts from back home. What about that Turing test you mentioned, though? That test is only to see if an artificial intelligence can exhibit human-like behavior, which chat programs have been able to do for decades. It can't tell me if Mr. Hugglebunny is actually self-aware or not. Erin grimaced. I really wish Pinky had picked a shorter name for him. Twilight managed a smile at that. Yeah, it really is a mouthful. Maybe we can come up with a nickname for him. The pensive look returned to her face and she sighed. Well, if nothing else, Princess Celestia needs to know about this. Discord has seriously managed to hamper our ability to use the elements against him. No he didn't, Pinky said suddenly from right next to them, causing them both to jump and Twilight to let out a little scream. Pinky. Erin gasped as she brought a hoof up to her chest, where her heart was beating fit to burst. You scared the crap out of me. Gross. Pinky said cheerfully. Also, I heard what you said. Twilight, obviously annoyed at Pinky's appearance but trying not to show it, managed to ask, and what are your thoughts? Well, hugs is an option, Pinky said thoughtfully while gesturing at the stuffed rabbit, who was still seated on the library's small couch. Or maybe, Mr. H. Or we could go with the Right Honourable Master Huggle Bunnington III, though that's a bit long for a nickname. Erin blinked a few times while Twilight's face froze in confusion for a few seconds. I didn't mean the nicknames, Twilight said after a moment. I meant about Discord. Why, the third? Erin asked. Not important right now, Twilight pointed out. Sorry. I meant that I know what he's doing, and I'm not going to let him get away with it, Pinky said with a sad little smile. Her ears perked up and her smile turned a little more genuine as she added, plus, I know Twilight's going to figure out something. Twilight took a step back, her eyes flicking to Hugglebunny and then back to Pinky. Of course I'm going to do my best, but chaos magic is. Well, it's chaotic, and not very well understood. I have no idea how it works. Pinky shrugged. Doesn't matter, you're Twilight Sparkle, that means you always do your best, and when it comes to magic, there's not any better. Oh, well, Twilight said with a blush. There's the Arcanum, not to mention the princesses. But I was planning on writing to Princess Celestia about this anyway, and I'm sure she would be happy to help. See. Pinky gave a little hop while beaming out a radiant smile. You're already coming up with ideas on what to do. Well, of course. Twilight replied, returning the smile with one of her own. You're one of my best friends. I'll do whatever I can to make you happy. But, Pinky, her ears drooped and she asked in a soft, reluctant tone, what if we can't make it permanent? What if Discord uses that to go out and do bad things? Erin's heart broke a little as Pinky wilted like a flower during a drought. But then the pink mare straightened up with a look of determination that Erin wasn't used to seeing in her eyes. Then we stop him, Pinky said, her voice firm. Discord is already holding my newest friend hostage. If he puts any of my other friends in danger, then we stop him. She smiled, then, girls, yes, Pinky. Twilight said. I could use a hug about now. Twilight rushed in, throwing her forelegs around Pinky's neck, with Erin just a half step behind her. They held each other for a few long moments, with Pinky trembling against Erin's chest. They broke eventually, with Pinky rubbing a foreleg across her damp eyes. I guess I should get going, Pinky said. I think I'd like to be alone for a while. That should be okay, Pinky, Twilight said. Discord said we have at least a day, maybe longer. Plus, he's got to know he's on thin ice after this stunt, so I doubt he's going to let his chaos magic wear off anytime soon. We'll take tonight to think of a bunch of things to try, and come at the problem fresh in the morning once we've all had a chance to rest and clear our minds. Pinky's smile looked almost like her normal one. Thanks, Twilight. You go do your thinky thing, and I'll go do my pinky thing. She walked over and scooped up Mr. Hugglebunny from his seat and placed him on her back. Bye, Twilight. Bye, Sunflower. Let's head home, Hugsy B. That is not my name, Mr. Hugglebunny protested as Pinky walked out of the front door. I'm worried about her, Twilight said quietly after the door closed. Me, too, Erin admitted. I hope she'll be okay. She's Pinky. Trust me, if there's anything Pinky is good at, it's bouncing back. She'll be fine. It's up to us to be there to make sure she's fine. But right now, I think she just needs to work through some things in her head. Makes sense, Erin said. I suppose I should get going, too. I wanted to get some takeout for dinner. Enough for two, in case Fluttershy is still at my place. Good idea, but you're not leaving quite yet. What do you mean? Twilight turned to fully face her, a serious look on her muzzle. Magic. I've been meaning to help you with it, but... Her ears drooped. I know I've had reasons, but I feel like I've been a bad friend. Oh, no, you. So. Twilight said with a bright smile, cutting her off. I'm going to monitor you as you try to use the Horn-Glow cantrip to see if I can figure out what's going wrong. Erin glanced at the door, wondering briefly if Twilight would fall for the old, look over there trick so she could bolt. She sighed, realizing that the unicorn would probably just teleport after her and use her telekinesis to drag her back into the library. Didn't you say your old professor was coming out tomorrow to give me a once-over? Erin asked. Maybe we could wait until then. Twilight had started shaking her head before Erin was even halfway through her last sentence. No time like the present. Come on, what are you afraid of? It's just a little cantrip. You call it the Horn-Glow cantrip, Erin muttered. I call it the give me a headache spell. Well, that shouldn't be the case if you do it right, Twilight said cheerfully. Besides, I could always brew up some willow bark tea later if your head hurts. Twilight's beaming face was almost enough to make Erin cringe. I'm not getting out of this, am I? Nope. Twilight said with a happy grin. Besides, it would be nice to work on a problem I actually know something about, for a change. Fine, Erin said after a heavy sigh. So, take it from the top. Where else? Remember, reach deep within yourself and imagine your magic moving up into your horn. I try it, but nothing ever seems to happen. Maybe it will be different this time, Twilight replied. So, what? Magic is an energy that exists inside a pony. Both inside and outside, Twilight said. Magic permeates everything in Equestria, and some of it will reside in a stable field inside of individual creatures. Most ponies only ever use their personal field for things like levitation and the like. But more complicated spells require the use of magic from outside of the pony using it. Like teleportation. Erin asked, recalling the one time Twilight had used that spell with her. She'd been dizzy and disoriented, but it had been one heck of a rush. Oh, yes. You use your personal field to gather in energy from Equestria's field, and you also link the two locations together via spell circles in order to travel between them. You've mentioned spell circles before, but you've never actually explained them. A spell circle is a logical arrangement of glyphs, wards, runes and lines, arranged in a pattern. Which, in spite of the name, isn't always a circle. Though it does typically have to complete a circuit. And none of this actually pertains to the matter at hoof, which means you're dithering instead of concentrating on what you're supposed to be doing. Fine, Erin grumbled, closing her eyes. Just like the book had said, she imagined gathering up the energy in her body on every inhale, and pushing it up into her horn on every exhale. Oddly enough, she wasn't getting any sensation of pain this time. Is it working? She asked, her eyes still closed. I don't know, Twilight said in a smug tone. You tell me. Erin cracked her left eye open, then gasped, opening both eyes wide. She crossed her eyes and looked up at her horn, which was pulsing with a soft, pine-green glow, the same color as her eyes. The moment she realized this, the light flickered and went out. Was that me? She asked, disbelieving. Her heart began speeding up, and a grin stretched its way across her muzzle. Was that really me? It was. Twilight grinned and hugged her around the neck. Dazed, Erin patted her on the back with a dopey smile on her face. That was perfect, and a pretty strong aura, too. It was. Oh, yes. Twilight said, breaking away, though she still had a huge smile on her face. Not that you can always judge a pony's strength by the brightness of their aura, but it looks like you'll at least be average. Cool. Oh, that was so. Erin trailed off, her joy fading as she felt a chill run up her spine. This was easy. I tried so hard before, and nothing happened but headaches. Well, what did you do differently this time? Nothing. Nothing. Well, that's not. Twilight trailed off at the same time. Oh, no, you think. Discord. Do you think he did something? Something the exam missed? Twilight's mouth opened and closed a couple of times. Well, I'm sure Professor Glimmer can tell us if he did. Or you could just ask me, Discord said. Erin jumped, startled. She turned to see the Chaos Spirit lounging on the couch recently vacated by Mr. Hugglebunny, a tub of popcorn balanced on his belly while he watched them. Nice light show, and you're welcome. You're welcome. Erin repeated, outraged. What did you do to me? Discord, you'd better come clean, and I mean right now, Twilight said with a glare, her ears pinned back on her head. Or what? Discord scoffed and tossed another clawful of popcorn into his face. You'll use the elements on me. If we have to, Twilight said. Oh, but what about poor Pinkie Pie? He drawled. She'll lose her friend. Twilight drew her head up and gave Discord a chilly smile. She's already agreed to use her element if necessary. Discord blinked, sitting up and spilling popcorn all over the library floor. She did. Yeah, Erin said, walking forward. Twilight joined her, and together the pair approached the spirit. I'm surprised you didn't see that with that time sight of yours. Oh, well, I wasn't watching, of course, Discord said quickly as he scooted back away from the pair of them. You really aren't all that interesting, you know. Well, she said she'd use the elements if she found out you were messing around with her friends, Twilight said. I would say that messing with Erin's personal magical field counts. Now, hold on, let's not be rash, Discord said, waving his hands in the air in front of him. I didn't hurt her, I swear. I was trying to be nice to a fellow freak. Freak. Erin shouted, incensed. She started forward, only to be barred by Twilight's foreleg across her chest. Explain, Twilight said in a flat monotone. Now, Discord sighed. Okay, fine. Time to come clean, as you say. Whatever her people did, it turned her personal magical field into something akin to a giant ball of yarn after a cat got into it. He snapped his talons, causing an enormous ball of purple yarn to appear out of nowhere. The ball unspooled, forming a tangled mass on the floor. Erin scowled and backed up as the yarn started tangling itself around her hooves. Twilight simply sighed, rolled her eyes and ignored the mess. As fun as that was to watch, Discord continued, eventually constant failure just gets boring. Changing her to human and back simply wound her back up, for lack of a better term. But I really didn't change anything at all. You rebooted me. Erin asked, stunned, shaking a foreleg to free it from the yarn. Lies and slander. Discord protested. You weren't even wearing boots. In any case, is it really so hard to believe I was honestly trying to help you? Twilight snorted. Help her, yeah, right, not buying it. You never do anything to help a pony out. Not unless it's to help you out, too. Discord cleared his throat and managed to look uncomfortable. Well, I may have had a teensy tiny little feeling that her being able to use magic was somehow vital to my own well-being. But I assure you, I mainly did it to be nice. Why, I even left her with her fake cutie mark. Erin shot a quick, confused glance at Twilight. Fake cutie mark. Twilight grimaced. Well, you didn't receive a mark the same way most ponies do. Yours is essentially an artificial pattern in your coat. Well, that wasn't the best news. Do you think I'll ever get a real one? Well, I know, Discord said, buffing his talons against his chest. But I'm not saying. Twilight glared at him before turning back to Erin. I'm not sure. Cutie marks always happen during a pony's formative years, but you're well beyond that. It may be that you never get an actual mark. Which is why I left it, even though it would have been hilarious watching her bumble around without one, Discord said, grinning. All right, Discord, Twilight said, glowering at the Draconiquus. Enough games. I want you to take me through what you did to her, exactly, step by step. Oh, dearie me, would you look at the time? Discord said, looking at his bare wrist. I simply must be going. Ta-ta. He disappeared in a puff of putrid purple smoke that set the two of them coughing. I swear, Twilight said, waving her foreleg in front of her face in a vain attempt to clear the air, he just gets worse every time I talk to him. At least all that yarn is gone, too. Erin stared off into space for a moment before she started walking to the door. Her thoughts were a disorganized jumble of worry, frustration and anger, skittering off in different directions every time she tried to focus. I need to clear my head, she said. I'm going for a run. But what about magic training? I'm a little nervous about using it before I have a chance to be checked out by that professor of yours. Who knows what he did? I want to make sure my head won't explode, or something. Your head won't explode, Erin. I may not be Professor Glimmer, but I'm pretty sure about that. It was tempting, Erin had to admit as she reached the door. Maybe after dinner. I really do need some time to get my head together, and I'm hungry. All right, Twilight said with a decisive nod. We get dinner, I'll go with you to check on Fluttershy, and then we come back and start with magic practice. A sour grimace crossed her features. Provided that no other disasters crop up, of course. This being Ponyville, that's a very real possibility. That statement brought out a chuckle in Erin. Yeah, we seem to have lots of interesting times, here. That we do, Twilight said, joining her at the door. That we do. Tilde tilde asterisk Luna asterisk tilde tilde. There were other places for her to be at that moment. No doubt there was currently a small army of paper-wielding administrators roaming the hallways who were, at that very moment, setting up a search pattern in order to find their wayward princess. There was also the daily troop inspection, and a meeting with a human ambassador from a place called Germany. The former she had simply put off for the moment, and the latter she had rescheduled. Instead, Luna found herself in Celestia's sitting room, watching as Professor Moonlight Glimmer performed a series of tests on a restless and squirming Prince Verdant. The albino mare's horn glowed a delicate shade of blue as she worked, her feel tickling over the young colt as Celestia lay on her belly on the floor, holding him between her forelegs as she spoke in low tones to try and keep him more or less still. After a few minutes had passed, Professor Glimmer sighed and let the light extinguish itself from her horn. She opened up her light pink eyes and offered Celestia a warm smile. He's perfectly fine, I can assure you. You are certain? Celestia asked, standing up and releasing the young prince, who immediately ran off to one corner of the room in order to play with some toys. I was expecting some magic surges by now. Not all unicorn foals go through magic surges, Professor Glimmer pointed out. My daughter didn't, and she turned out to be pretty adept at magic. I told you so, sister, Luna said, chuckling at the brief but intense glare that Celestia shot her way. Both your examination and my own have come to the same conclusion. Will this third opinion finally put your fears to rest? It helps, Celestia admitted. However, Verdant isn't the only pony to have a body provided by the human's ascent process. You're referring to Erin Sunflower, of course, Professor Glimmer replied. She grinned, a hungry look coming into her eye. Oh, I can't wait to get my hooves on her. I'm on my way to Ponyville to examine her next, you know. You've only mentioned it several times, Luna pointed out dryly. She helped herself to one of the scones that Celestia had set out with the tea. You understand my concern, though, Celestia said, glancing over at Verdant. According to Twilight's reports, Erin hasn't been able to cast unicorn magic at all, though she seems to be able to use at least some Pegasus magic. I'm worried that Verdant's growth will be stunted. Moonlight Glimmer shook her head. I wouldn't worry, he's fine, I'm certain of it. As far as Erin goes, well, from what I understand, the humans made some major modifications to her form, most of which don't apply to Verdant. The original template was male, for example. I suppose that's true, Celestia said, obviously not quite ready to give up on her fears yet. Well, there's not much we can do, regardless, Luna said, for what felt like the 100th time. Of course we'll keep an eye on him and take whatever steps we can if they are needed. But for now, we should simply allow him to grow normally. Celestia looked like she wanted to argue, but she didn't get the chance. By the by, as long as we're talking about humans, Professor Glimmer said, cutting off the impending argument apparently without even realizing it, I discovered something quite interesting. Oh. Luna said, gladly latching onto the change of subjects. Please, do go on. Well, there's quite a few of them in Canterlot, as you know. We're aware, yes, Celestia said. There are just over 100, according to the latest reports. They've begun renting apartments in the city proper, Luna said. Ambassadorial staff and research teams, for the most part. They're studying everything from our history to our weather. And our culture, Celestia added, trying to get the last word in like she always did. And our economy, Luna put in, not willing to let her have it. Not to mention failing to discover anything at all about magic. Well, maybe not failing for much longer, Professor Glimmer said, grinning. I've studied dozens of them, and I can now confirm that it's not a fluke. Some humans are starting to integrate into Equestria's magical field. Now, that was unexpected. Truly, Luna asked. Oh, yes. The professor replied. She began pacing, her voice picking up in both speed and volume as she spoke. It's far too tenuous to tell what form their magic will eventually take, of course. And it's not all of them, though I haven't discovered any significant biological differences between those gaining magic and those who don't. But I believe the process is just starting, and may get stronger. We could have fully magical humans in Equestria within a few years. Professor Glimmer stopped her pacing and beamed a smile at them. Every species on Equus has been part of the magical field for as long as we've ever known. We've never had a chance to examine a species develop magic as it happened. Can you imagine what we might learn? She began hopping in place. Oh, this is so exciting. It was disconcerting, for lack of a better word, to see a mare of Moonlight Glimmer's age and size bouncing up and down like an excitable filly. Prince Verdant had stopped playing with his toys to gape at the giggling mare. Princess Luna cleared her throat. Yes, well, very exciting, I agree. We look forward to your reports on the subject, of course. You'll have them, Professor Glimmer promised, finally ceasing her frivolous behavior. Though it looked like it would take a team of doctors several hours to remove the grin that was adhered to her muzzle. I'll be doing plenty of studying. After all, I've become very close to some of them. She blushed, the red coming up startlingly bright on her pale coat. One in particular, she admitted. Luna gaped at the mare, who had a look that could only be described as proudly embarrassed. Oh. Celestia said, a small smile appearing on her own muzzle. One of the humans has caught your eye. His name is Dwight Robertson, and he's also a biologist, Moonlight Glimmer said. He's smart, funny and attentive, and, for a nearly hairless ape, he's fairly attractive. Well, I'm very happy for you, Celestia said, using a wing to hug the shorter mare to her side. What can I say? Moonlight Glimmer said with a laugh. I've always kind of had a thing for bipeds. Remember that Minotaur I dated in college? Luna shook her head but refrained from saying anything. This was the new Equestria, she reminded herself. Interspecies romances were no longer unheard of. Though, personally, she couldn't imagine being physically attracted to anything bipedal. Not to change the subject, Luna said, though she was perfectly happy to do so, but have you been in contact with the rest of the Arcanum, recently? Not recently, no, Professor Glimmer responded. Has something come up? I've been inviting various members to the castle for some time, now. The humans have finally finished building the harmonics facility here in Canterlot, and I wanted the Arcanum's input on how to stabilize the aperture and eliminate the need to allow the veil to regenerate. Luna let out a disaffected HMPH. One would think that the members of the leading institute of magical research in Equestria would be interested in such a thing. Oh. Well, that type of research isn't exactly my area of expertise, but I'd be more than happy to head out and visit a few of my colleagues after I return from Ponyville. Professor Glimmer frowned and shook her head. I can't imagine why at least a few of them wouldn't find the time to come out and help. I'm not aware of any major projects any pony may be working on at the moment. Thank you, Luna said. Between taking over more and more of Celestia's daily tasks and training the Dream Guard, Luna's patience had been fraying like a poorly made rug. It was a welcome relief to find that at least one of the Arcanum was willing to work with her. My pleasure, Princess Luna. Professor Glimmer looked over at the clock ticking away on a nearby wall. Well, I suppose I should get going. I mean to catch an early train tomorrow morning, and I should turn in early. I'm not as young as I used to be, after all. Farewell, Moonlight Glimmer, Luna said. Until we meet again. Take care, Celestia said, giving the mare another hug. See you soon. Moonlight Glimmer gave a little wave and made for the door. The two of them stood in silence for a few moments after she'd left, until Luna could no longer contain herself. A Minotaur, was she serious? Celestia laughed, scooping up Little Verdant in her magic in spite of his protests. She was, indeed. It only lasted a few months, though. Luna sighed and slowly shook her head. Every time she thought she was adjusting to life 1,000 years removed from what was familiar, something new popped up to surprise her. 'Tis a strange world we live in, Sally. Fluttershy ***. Discord. Fluttershy paused in the doorway of her cottage, her ears rotating around on the top of her head. No lights were on, and there was no noise that she could make out. With a sigh, she removed her saddlebags, hanging them on a hook by the door before making her way inside. Angel Bunny scampered between her legs, running into the center of her living room. He stopped, looking around with his little pink nose twitching. With no sign of discord, Angel finally relaxed and jumped up on the sofa. He just curled up to lay down when one of the sofa cushions suddenly sprouted a yellow, red-eyed eye and a grinning mouth. Before Fluttershy could protest, the pillow whispered, "Boo," into Angel's ear. Angel bolted, scrambling between Fluttershy's forelegs before glaring defiantly back at Discord. With a sigh, Fluttershy stepped into her living room and sat down in front of the sofa. This next part was necessary, but it was going to be tricky. Discord, she said, keeping her voice level. We need to talk. Who is this, Discord, of whom you speak? The pillow replied. I am but a humble cushion, eagerly awaiting my chance to provide some small comfort to those posteriors who would recline here. Please, Discord. It's important. The pillow sighed, then disappeared in a flash of light. Discord, back in what could only be described as his normal form, leaned back on the sofa with an air of careless indolence. I suppose I was tattled upon, he said. You can't expect us not to talk to each other, Discord. Perhaps not, though it is rude to speak about someone behind their back. As rude as changing some ponies' form against their will, Fluttershy asked softly. As rude as using chaos magic to play with Pinkie Pie's emotions like you did. She waited a moment before adding, she's really upset, you know. And worried. You did that to her. I also gave her a new friend, Discord replied irritably. Why does every pony keep forgetting that? Are you saying that you did it to be nice? Fluttershy asked, making sure to keep her voice level and calm. Well, that was one reason, sure. And what you did to Mr. Hugglebunny, Fluttershy said. That was to manipulate us into not using the elements against you. Discord snorted. It was a long shot, anyway, but I did think Pinkie would like it. He laughed, then, and I thought it would be just hilarious watching other ponies react to him. Fluttershy nodded. I see. And Eren, who? Discord scratched at his chin for a moment before a light bulb suddenly popped into existence above his head. Oh, yes, the fake pony. I keep forgetting her name. You changed something with her, Twilight said. I fixed her. There's a difference. He crossed his arms, scowling. Not that any pony seems to appreciate that. I see. We had this talk last night, remember? Blair. You mean you lectured me? Discord rolled his eyes. Well. Maybe a little, Fluttershy admitted. Asking for permission and respecting everyone else's limits may not be fun, but it is really important. At least, it is if you want to get along with every pony. This is all nonsense, anyway, Discord grumbled, gesturing expansively. What do you mean? You keep telling me how everything I do is wrong, that I'm the one who needs to change to protect all the precious little pony's feelings. But what about them adapting to me? His eyes got all watery and his lip wobbled. Aren't my feelings important, too? Fluttershy recognized a ploy for sympathy when she saw it. That didn't mean it wasn't effective. Of course they are, she said, But I'm the one who has to be accommodating, Discord interrupted. Everything you tell me is, Discord, don't do this and Discord, don't do that, but no one else had to change anything for my sake. As much as she wanted to deny it, Fluttershy had to admit that he had a point. Well, except for one thing. Except for me, she reminded him. Not that I haven't enjoyed your company, but I have to admit, all the chaos takes some getting used to. I suppose that's true, came Discord's grudging admission. And you have to remember, you're so much more powerful than any pony else. It's really scary for us when you do things like that, even if you have good intentions. You could really hurt us if you're not careful. But what about my feelings, Fluttershy? Discord's eagle talon pressed up against his chest as he stared soulfully at her. You don't need my frankly staggering amounts of chaos magic to hurt those. He gave an outrageously fake sniffle. Pinkie isn't even going to invite me to her party. Fluttershy thought about that for a moment. You know, you have a point. Discord blinked. I do, yes. If we want you to be our friend, we need to try to include you. More firmly, she added, but that also means that, if you want to be our friend, you have to wait until you're invited. But Pinkie wasn't going to invite me. Discord let out a sour humph and crossed his arms across his chest. I would have been waiting forever. I had enough of that as a statue in Celestia's garden. Then you can talk to her about it. And if she still says no. Fluttershy offered up a smile. Then we don't go. Wait, we. He removed an ear from his head, inserted a talon into it and wiggled it around before popping it back into place. Did I hear that correctly? Fluttershy nodded. You would actually avoid going to Pinkie's party, just to keep me company. I would, huh? Discord stroked his goatee for a few seconds. Well, I'll consider it, I suppose. Fluttershy smiled, but it was an uncertain one. Would you be willing to apologize? She asked tentatively. Discord's eyebrow shot up so fast, she could swear she heard a miniature sonic boom. Or maybe he was just playing his chaos magic tricks again. Excuse me. Oh, well, Fluttershy fidgeted, her ears drooping momentarily before she remembered that she was supposed to be projecting strength and authority at the moment. She straightened up and spoke firmly. It's just that, I think Pinky would be more willing to let you go to the party if you apologized. What have I ever done that required an apology? Discord demanded, indignant. Fluttershy blinked at him a few times. Really? Oh, you mean for the whole, reversing your personality, thing? Discord waved his paw dismissively. PSHH, water under the bridge, old news. Hardly relevant to the discussion. You wanted something more recent? Fluttershy asked, a small frown appearing on her muzzle. Whatever it was you did to Erin. What you did to Pinky's friend Mr. Hugglebunny. I believe he goes by Hugsy B now, Discord said. And, besides, I did both of them a favor. They don't feel like you did them a favor, she pointed out. They feel like you used your magic to manipulate them, all without even asking for permission. And they're right, that's what you did. Well. Discord huffed. I don't have to stay here and take this. With a snap of his talons, he vanished in a flash of shimmering light. Fluttershy slumped with a sigh. After a moment, a familiar white shape snuggled up against her. She extended a wing and hugged Angel to her side. That could have gone better, she said. *** Raka ***. Oh, you are just beautiful, Raka said, her voice barely a breath above a whisper. She was looking intently into a plant that resembled a fern with thick, waxy leaves. Peering out of the plant were a pair of bright blue eyes positioned on either side of a delicate snout. There was no fear in those eyes, only a sort of wary curiosity. But, even so, the small dragon-like creature showed no interest in coming closer. After a few minutes of Raka holding perfectly still, the Dragonling, as the research group had unanimously dubbed the creatures, crept cautiously forward on the axis of one of the strange fern stalks. Raka held her breath as the Dragonling stretched out its wings, the membrane a semi-translucent sea blue that matched the rest of its dark green-blue body. The thin neck stretched forward and it tilted its head one way and then the other as it looked at her. The Dragonling's muzzle opened and it chirped out a little, whirrick noise. Seemingly unable to help herself, Raka reached out, painfully slow, and extended a finger towards the Dragonling. The diminutive creature, reptile, perhaps, something else, stretched its head out and sniffed. And then, much to Raka's delight, it rubbed its head along her fingertip, rather like a cat might have. Raka couldn't have stopped grinning at that moment if her life depended on it. It was all worth it, she decided right then. The uncomfortable sleeping arrangements, the disturbing dreams, the lack of sleep that made her every waking minute drag with exhaustion, the constant feeling of being exposed when walking around the alien world, and whatever other surprises that may still be coming. All of it, completely worth it just for this moment. It was the greatest moment of her life up until that then, and she was pretty sure it could never be topped. The Dragonling proved that notion wrong when it unexpectedly launched itself into the air and circled Raka's head 3 times before landing on her shoulder, its needle-sharp claws pricking her skin through her shirt. She winced as it scrambled a little, too big to really rest comfortably on her shoulder, and she knew she'd be bleeding from the scratches. It managed to situate itself, the wings knocking her in the head once as it folded them along its back, its lengthy tail dangling down her back. She froze, unwilling to move as the Dragonling examined the side of her head, her ears tickling at the little puffs of air as it sniffed at her. Then, much to her ecstatic, if restrained, joy, it let out another little whirrick and nestled up against her neck, seeming much satisfied with the world. It looks like you've got a new friend, said a soft voice from about 20 feet away. Very slowly, Raka turned to regard the armed security team member that had accompanied her. In a hoarse voice, she whispered, if you do anything to scare this creature away, I will end you. The guard, a young man of Pakistani descent named Randall Sati, chuckled and shook his head. Wouldn't dream of it, as long as it's not attacking you. Raka sighed. She tried to make it as clear as she could over the last few days that she didn't need or want an armed escort. But the security team didn't listen, instead insisting that they keep to their stupid, buddy system, security protocols. She returned her attention to where it should have been, the little Dragonling curled up on her shoulder, and began making as many observations as she could while wishing that she dared to take out her tablet and start taking notes. She was too worried about upsetting the creature to try it, though. From what she could tell as it rested on her shoulder, it weighed around 7 pounds. This was a surprisingly heavy weight for a creature with a wingspan that she estimated at only 24 inches. From the tip of its snout to the end of its tail, she guessed that it measured roughly 18 inches, give or take an inch or 3. It was warm, far warmer than even the humid air of the alien forest around her, indicating that it may be a warm-blooded creature. When it had walked around on her shoulder, she could feel that it had 4 claws on each forelimb, and at least 3 on the hind ones. If only she had a picture. Actually, maybe her armed escort wasn't so useless, after all. Hey, Raka called out gently. Take some pictures of it. Sorry. Randall asked. Put down your gun, Raka explained with forced patience. Take out your camera, and take as many pictures of it as you can. Zoom in as much as possible. Right, he said. As he shuffled around, trying to bring out his camera, the Dragonling looked up at him and tilted its head. Whirrick, it said in a questioning tone. It's okay, Raka said. Conscious of not moving too quickly, she reached up and stroked it along the jaw. The movement startled the little creature for a moment before it leaned in and made rapid little glue noises in its throat, as if it was trying to swallow. After a few seconds of this, Raka began to take her hand away only for the Dragonling to grasp at her finger with what turned out to be prehensile front claws. With a surprisingly firm grip, it pulled her finger back towards its jaw. Fine, Raka said with a mild chuckle. You let me study you, and I give you head scratches. Fair trade, right? Randall's camera, an expensive digital model that had been provided to each member of the expedition regardless of their function, was completely silent as he pressed the button repeatedly. Make sure to zoom in on as many individual features as you can, Raka said. Of course, Dr. Nair, he replied. The three of them stayed that way for what Randall later told her was nearly half an hour. During that time, several more dragonlings flew past, giving Raka and her little guest curious glances. After some time, the dragonling, apparently satisfied with the attention it had been given, let out one last little whirrick and launched itself off of her shoulder, leaving a few new scratches next to the previous ones. Bye, now, Raka said quietly as the blue dragonling orbited her head once, then a second time, before vanishing into the woods. Wow, Randall said. Then he added, hey, you're really bleeding. Yeah. Those little claws are sharp. She reached back and felt along her back. The scratches were already tacky and her shirt was sticking uncomfortably to them. I'll have to add some padding to the shoulders of my shirts. You going to be okay? Randall asked. Maybe we should head back, get that treated. Raka, who had just been ready to suggest the same thing, almost decided to declare her intent to stay out until the sun started setting. The scratches stung a little too much for that, though. Yeah, come on, she said, picking up the backpack she had slipped to the ground when she first spotted the dragonling. She winced as she put it on, the strap rubbing against the scratches on her back. Transfer those pictures to me when we get back, okay? I need to log as much as I can while the memory is fresh. You got it, Dr. Naya. Raka sighed. She didn't really want to play nice, not with the armed escort that had been forced on her, but tempers were getting short enough amongst members of the camp. Any little bit of politeness now would only help. You can just call me Raka, Randall. Yes, ma'am, he said crisply, and she rolled her eyes at him. Together, the two of them made their way through the humid atmosphere back to the camp. Even though it was just a couple of miles, they moved at a glacial pace. Raka had her eyes on the ground and insisted on collecting every sample she could. Her backpack was already stuffed full, and she found herself regretting not bringing along another bag. Would you object to bringing a bag along next time? Raka asked. I'm collecting too many samples to carry easily. Sorry, Raka. My job is to keep an eye out for you, and I already have plenty of gear to carry. You could check out one of the mules, though. Raka wrinkled her nose. One of those mechanical walking things. They're way too loud. They'd scare off all the wildlife. Randall shrugged. Sorry, just a suggestion. Why are they even called mules, anyway? She asked, irritated. I mean, isn't that kind of insulting to the equestrians? Aren't there actual, talking mules where they come from? I guess. I don't know, sorry. I know it's an acronym, though. Multi-purpose utility. Something, I always forget the last two. With an annoyed HMPH, Raka walked on. With what little space remained in her backpack, she decided that any further samples would have to be something truly unique. The problem was, everything here looked worthy of that description. At least the rest of the trip went a lot faster without her stopping to pick up every interesting little thing she saw. Soon enough, the ring of steel that marked the Harmony Expedition base camp came into sight. Randall offered a wave before splitting off and checking in with his duty officer. Raka immediately made a beeline to the biology lab, intending to secure her samples before they deteriorated any further. Once that was done, it was off to medical. The nurse took careful samples of the scratches on a cotton swab, in order to check for alien microorganisms before sterilizing the wounds and applying several bandages. Feeling better, Raka passed the next few hours documenting the day's events. First, her encounter with the dragonling. Every detail she could remember, as well as the pictures that Randall had taken, were entered into the log. Then it came time to catalog the rest of her samples, which included plant life, dirt from several locations, and a few insects that ranged from midge-sized all the way up to something that looked a little like a dragonfly almost twice as long as her hand. It wasn't until the dragonling sunset song started up, making the sheet metal walls of the biology trailer thrum in sympathy, that Raka realized that she'd worked through most of the day. She got up off of the stool she'd been sitting on for the last several hours, wincing at the aches and muscle knots she'd brought upon herself by sitting hunched over for so long, and hurried outside. She'd made a point of listening to the song every night, as had most of the rest of the research team. Raka closed her eyes, letting the song sweep her up. Somewhere out there, she knew, the little dragonling who had befriended her was singing its little heart out. Oddly melancholy, slightly hopeful, with peaks of joy and valleys of sorrow, the song echoed through her. In an odd way, it seemed a counterpoint to the nightly dreams she'd been having, a hope that, whatever might come, whatever trials she had to face, that everything would turn out all right in the end. In due time, the song ended. With it, the camp resumed its normal activity. Raka allowed herself a smile. Taken merely on a physical measure, things could have been better. Dried sweat coated her skin, which felt dry and itchy. She was sure she stank after going days without a hot shower. Until they could verify that the local water was potable, all of their water had to be carefully rationed. The scratches on her shoulder still stung from the antiseptic. Even so, there was nowhere else in the universe she'd rather be at that moment. Raka made her way through the rapidly darkening campsite until she found her lawn chair and gingerly lowered herself into it. It was still new to her. Even after 3 days here, it was all still fresh and exciting in a way she'd never experienced before in her life. In the black sky above, nearly untainted by light pollution, the stars wheeled above her in unfamiliar patterns. The night had cooled considerably, the humidity dropping to the point where the air was fresh and clean, the sharp clover-like smell of the creeping vine that carpeted the hill under their campsite filling her nostrils with a tang. The large white moon was already overhead, bathing the world below in its glow. Raka was tired, but she had no interest in turning in yet. Her dreams since arrival had been troubling, disturbing, actually. She chalked that up to the intense excitement and, yes, worry, that she felt during her waking hours. Until Harmonix managed to reopen the gateway, she and the rest of the team were basically stranded here. Not to mention any hidden dangers that might be lurking out of sight. She could die on this world, she knew. That fact was never far from her mind. So it was easy to put the dreams of endless, longing dread into the context of facing her own mortality, and therefore write them off. That didn't mean she was in any hurry to face them again, though. You can't sleep, either, a voice said from her left. Hey, Spectral, she said, smiling at her friend. She could barely see him with the camp lights, but she could tell that his coat was brushed and his mane was as tidy as ever. She wasn't sure how he managed to be so neat, but it was hard to imagine a disheveled spectral charm. Haven't tried, yet. He grunted and laid down on the still unnamed plant life beneath him. I'm not in a hurry, either. I never remembered my dreams until I came here. His jaw cracked into a yawn. Looks like tonight is a three-moon night. Raka looked skyward again, seeing that he was right. So far, the large white moon, tentatively dubbed Harmony Major, had appeared each night. It was usually, though not always, accompanied by both of the smaller blue moons, called Harmony Minor Alpha and Beta, though Raka wasn't sure how anyone could tell them apart. Tonight, unlike the previous night, all three were in the sky. It's a pretty night, Raka said, stretching out on her lawn chair. Yeah. Those moons bother me, though. Raka glanced over at Spectral, who was now only a dark silhouette next to her. Light gleamed off of his glasses as he peered skyward. I think they're beautiful, yes. But they're wrong, Spectral replied. The more I look at them, the more wrong they seem. Raka frowned, studying the moons in the sky. One of the two smaller light blue ones was barely touching the eastern horizon, with the second just slightly in front of the large white one almost directly overhead. They were eerie, she had to admit, but she couldn't place anything specifically odd about them. How so? Near as we can tell, the two smaller moons share the same orbit. I'm no astronomer, but Dr. Wang is, and she told me that should be impossible. He grimaced and added, or, well, obviously not impossible, as we're looking at it, but it is completely inexplicable. Ha, she said. I suppose they'd collide eventually, especially since they seem to move at slightly different speeds. That's not the only thing that's got me concerned. The two perfect. Raka squinted up above her. What do you mean? Perfectly smooth, no visible flaws, not even with a telescope. The larger, white moon has a few craters, but the two small moons look almost polished, somehow. He sighed and shook his head. It's almost as if they're artificial. But what could create a moon? Raka chuckled and, at Spectral's curious look, adopted a bad parody of a British accent. That's no moon, she said, trying to sound ominous. He blinked at her and looked back up at the sky, frowning. Perhaps not, but what else could they be? Sorry, I was making a reference to a really old movie. Oh. He rubbed one foreleg against the other. Tell me about it, the movie. She asked. He nodded. It'll take a long time. It's not like I'm going back to bed yet, he replied. I'm in no rush to experience those dreams again. Well, okay, Raka said, sitting down and folding her legs in front of her. Spectral leaned against her side, radiating a welcome heat into her shivering body. She draped an arm across his withers and began speaking. It all started long ago, in a galaxy far, far away. Raka told the story of Star Wars, probably getting lots of the details wrong. As her eyes adapted to seeing only by the light of the moons, she gradually became aware that she was gathering something of an audience. Both humans and ponies had gathered around and were listening, the ponies raptly and the humans with some amusement. Isn't anyone planning on going to bed tonight? She asked irritably. There was a lot of noncommittal shuffling and muttering in the darkness. This is more interesting, one of the ponies in the moonlight darkness said. Were they able to escape Tatooine in the Millennial Falcon? Millennium, one of the human audience members said. Raka recognized the voice as coming from Randall, her security guard from earlier that day. You want to tell this story? The pony asked irritably. You can if you want to, Raka said. All right, Randall said. He gestured dramatically and intoned. The Falcon shuddered, refusing to start. And for a moment it seemed to Luke that they'd picked the wrong ship, that it was just as big a pile of junk as it had seemed at first. But then, much to his surprise, whoosh, it took off, burning for the stars, leaving Mos Eisley in the dust behind it. What's Mos Eisley? A pony asked. You mean Mos Eisner? It's actually Mos Eisley. Raka got the name wrong, Randall said. Raka stuck her tongue out at him, but she wasn't sure if he could see it in the gloom. Randall took over, telling the tale of the intrepid adventurers rescuing the princess. The night spun on, and eventually Randall stopped to let another human take over the tale. It would have gone faster, but the ponies would sometimes stop to ask for explanations of different plot elements. After a while, Randall's voice started going hoarse and he passed the storyteller duties to Ben Masters, one of the members of the cartography team, who managed a passable Darth Vader impression. The humans all clapped, and the ponies stomped their hooves in appreciation. Thank you, Ben said, bowing. How about part 2 tomorrow night? There's a part 2. A pony asked. Didn't they win? What could happen next? You don't overthrow an evil empire that easily, Ben pointed out. Sometimes it takes a few tries. Well, a different pony said, stretching out his neck and back legs. I suppose it's time for bed. He trailed off, looking around. None of the assembled audience seemed in a particularly big hurry to get going. You know, Spectral Charm said slowly, as long as we're telling stories, there was a favorite of mine I heard when I was a colt. How Arcanus the Bold tricked the secrets of magic from an ancient dragon. I don't suppose anyone is interested. That idea seemed to generate some interest amongst the unicorns and humans, though the Pegasi and Earth ponies didn't seem so enthused. Windbreaker, who had taken up a position on Spectral's left side, spoke up. I don't think I've ever heard that one, though it sounds interesting. Once you're done, maybe I could tell the story of how Storm Dancer managed to calm the Lord of Tempests. That's always been a favorite of mine. The suggestion was met with general approval, and the stories continued into the night. After Spectral came Windbreaker, followed by Ben once again, who, at the prompting of more than a few ponies in the audience, started up on The Empire Strikes Back. Raka, wondering what she'd started, looked around with a smile. As tired as she was, it was great to see the team come together like this. It seemed obvious now that stories that she'd known her whole life would be new and exciting to the ponies. And, of course, the same was true in reverse. The stories shared many similarities, structure-wise, though the pony tale seemed to revolve more on using cleverness, guile and tricks to solve problems, rather than outright confrontation. As she pondered whether this was due to societal or biological differences, she slowly and unexpectedly drifted asleep. Time. So much time, stretched out around her, a vast ocean of it with no end in sight. The sun rose, set, rose again, the moons dancing across the sky, the stars wheeling in their courses, never changing, unending. Below, the land stretched vibrant and verdant, but she found herself unable to touch it, no matter how longingly she reached. Her very soul ached for even a touch of the green below her, but she could feel nothing. Day after day passed into countless nights, blurring from one to the next, never changing, each day whittling away another little piece of herself until all that was left was a hollow echo of who she used to be, no longer remembering who she was or why the land below was so important to her, leaving behind an aching and endless sorrow. Raka woke with a gasp. She shivered, curling up on herself and momentarily unable to remember who or where she was. After a few moments, the echoes of the dream faded, and she came back to herself. She looked around, her heart slowing back to its normal rhythm. For a moment, she thought that Ben and Randall were coming to blows, Ben standing imperiously over the crouching Randall while brandishing a length of tent pole he grabbed from somewhere. Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father, Ben said in his remarkably accurate impression of Darth Vader. He told me enough. Randall responded spitefully. He told me you killed him. The audience of humans and ponies, somewhat smaller now as a few of them had presumably left to seek whatever sleep they could, were listening intently, the humans looking smug and the ponies completely enraptured. No, Ben intoned. I am your father. The ponies all gasped while the humans chuckled. No, no. That's not true. It's impossible, Randall cried out. Luke, stop arguing with your father and get to bed. Someone called out from one of the dormitory trailers. It's late, and we're trying to sleep. The moment broke the tension, prompting a round of chuckles from the audience. Raka, still shaken from her dream, managed a wan smile. Everything okay, Raka? Spectral Charm asked. She looked over at her unicorn friend. Even in the darkness, she could see the concern etched across his face. I'm fine, she said, as Ben and Randall started up where they left off, albeit much more quietly than before. Just fell asleep and had a bad dream. It's nothing. I've been having trouble sleeping, too, Windbreaker said from his seat at Spectral's side. Never had dreams like it before. It was like I was a ghost, trapped in eternity. A chill raced down Raka's spine. Like, you're flying over the landscape and you're not able to touch anything. Like you've lost something important, but you can't remember what it is, and every day that goes past you lose a little more of yourself. Windbreaker nodded, his eyes wide. Yeah, he said, clearly shaken. That's the dream I had. Coincidence, Spectral Charm said, though he sounded unconvinced. It has to be. We can't all have had the same dreams. You too, Spectral? Raka asked. He gave a mute nod. What does it mean? She asked the other two, pitching her voice low. In the background, Randall was describing Luke's fall through the Cloud City, only to be rescued at the last moment by the Millennium Falcon. She looked around at the rest of the audience, all of whom were showing signs of exhaustion as they watched Ben and Randall play act the final scene of The Empire Strikes Back. Do you think others have had that dream, too? Spectral Charm shook his head. No idea, but we should bring it up in the morning. If we're all having similar dreams, there must be a common cause. We need to figure out what it is. I thought this place was too perfect, Windbreaker muttered sourly. A whole planet teeming with life and magic, just for us. Yeah, right. No need to start a panic over this, Spectral Charm said. Whatever it is, I'm sure we can find the cause. No need for alarm. Truly, we can handle whatever this planet throws at us. Raka would have been a lot more reassured by Spectral's statement if it weren't for the fact that his eyes were a little wild and his coat was standing on edge, making him seem slightly larger than usual. But they were still a little over a week away from being able to go home. What else could they do? We'll figure this out, Raka said, trying to make her voice calm and steady. We'll find out what's happening, and we'll deal with it. Everything is going to be just fine. The caretaker *. 15. That was all that was left of the once mighty Faith Guardians. 15 remaining of the hundreds that had once maintained the order of the citadel of the goddess and the various temples. They stood before him, the newly bonded, if initially unwilling, Inspiri attached to them looking at him with stoic expressions while awaiting their orders. When the priests had become the original Faith Guardians, they had retained the entirety of their original selves. These new Inspiri had no original selves to speak of. The caretaker had instead crafted a single template and impressed that template on the souls of the random dreamers he had plucked from the soul font. They would be unimaginative, uninspired and simple, but they would follow orders. The soul template had taken days of unceasing work. The bonding itself was not as firm as he would have liked it to be, which could only be expected from such inferior materials. He wasn't overly concerned with that, however. The invaders had to deal with the greatly reduced magic that radiated from the barrier moons. The Faith Guardians had no such limitation. Each of them had a key rune etched into their forms, a new addition from the caretaker himself, based on the one in his staff. With the key rune, each of them could pull magic directly from the barrier itself. The Faith Guardians would be more powerful, by far, than anything the invaders could bring to bear. Overwhelming force was, after all, what they were designed for. There was, however, a problem. The Guardians would deal with the current invaders easily, but if they came in greater numbers, they might overwhelm his defenses. 15 Guardians, as powerful as they were, would not be enough. Fortunately, there were other options. The various tribes and castes had all developed their own biomagical weaponry, all attempting to reach the pinnacle the Faith Guardians had dominated for millennia on end. And, of course, those efforts always fell short of reaching those heights. However, they had one advantage that the Faith Guardians did not: they were much more numerous. Many would have been destroyed during the wars, of course. Many more would have fallen apart as the millennia sleeted by. But many would still be usable, buried in ancient strongholds scattered the world over, just waiting to be woken up and bound with a fresh soul. Forget defense, the caretaker mused. If I can harness the might of all the biomagical wartime horrors to my cause, I can take the fight to the invaders' home world. I can destroy them utterly, and end the threat of them for all time. The Faith Guardians were still waiting for their orders, their blank faces tracking him as he moved. It set him a little on edge. Before the war, he had been a mage without peer. Yet, if he had made a mistake in the template, if any of the Guardians retained even a spark of the true selves and opted for revenge, he would be in for the fight of his life. Best to get them out of his presence, then. The invaders are here, he said, indicating on a holographic map. Proceed to this place, capture those who do not resist, and bring them here. Kill those who try to fight you. Go, now, quote. The Faith Guardians said nothing, but around them the air itself seemed to twist. A moment later, all 15 of them were gone. The caretaker turned away and began searching the Citadel's records for any and all vaults or strongholds that may have contained the weapons of his ancient enemies. At one time, those weapons had threatened to tear his world apart. It was fitting, he thought as he searched, that those same weapons would now serve to defend that same world. Author's notes. Many thanks to my editing crew. Brilliant point. Co and Co. Ekivu.